Well, folks, in today's video, we're going to be working on this 1970s era Canadian Pacific F unit from Pemco. This was a locomotive which I paid $1 Canadian for just a couple months ago at the OVAR flea market, and I have a feeling that part of the reason it was going so cheap was because the seller wanted absolutely nothing to do with this thing. He certainly did not have great things to say about it. When I asked him about it, he was basically pointing out that this was all cracked, the gears were likely split, the whole drive was packed with dust. The likelihood that this thing would ever run again was probably about a zero, and he pretty much said that this thing would probably be better off in a garbage can than it would be on anybody's layout. But I kind of took that as a challenge. I was like, well, I'll pay $1 for this thing and then I'll get to be the judge of that. So I brought it back, and as it would turn out, this thing was actually in much better shape than he led me on to believe. Because when I gave it some power, it actually did move a little bit. It certainly wasn't really running. I mean, it moved a little bit under its own power. It sounded horrible. But it was showing some signs of life. So I think that we have a chance to get this thing going once again. So today we're going to see if we can crack this thing open, clean up the whole gearbox, and let it ride the rails for the first time in maybe 20 years. Who knows? Let's take it over to the track. I'll show you all what it's doing right now, and then we'll go from there. See what we can do on it. I'm pretty sure last time we got this thing to run like 2 or 3 feet under its own power, but it just sounded absolutely horrible. I mean, the drive certainly isn't healthy. I really just want to kind of show you all what it's doing right now. You know, you can see, like, it is trying to run. It just, I don't know, it's losing power or something. Everything on it probably needs to be serviced. I'll give it full power here. But it certainly has some room to be improved upon. So as you can see, it certainly needs quite a bit of work, but I wouldn't call it hopeless. So we're gonna try to open this thing up and see if we can remedy whatever's going wrong with it. To be completely honest with you, I'm not super familiar with Pemco locomotives. I've only worked on a couple in the past, so I don't know how well this is all going to go, but yeah, there's only one way to learn, right? And when you're dealing with a locomotive that only costs $1, you don't have to worry too much. This right off the bat looks kind of interesting. We've got 2 different wires, and this one which heads nowhere. And then there's the whole drive. It's really, you know, not a whole lot in this locomotive. This is really the area we need to focus on. I don't know how we should open this up. I think I'll try removing this screw right here, and then the whole thing will probably be removable. Alright, that's not a bad start. I'm really hoping this whole part doesn't fall apart when I unscrew it. Well, I guess we'll lift this part up and have a look at the motor. Alright, this all doesn't look bad. In fact, this motor looks like it's right out of a Tyco. Pretty much identical design. Anyway, we'll just get all these parts out and throw them in my parts dish here so I don't lose them, and then yeah, we'll go on to service the whole motor. I did notice that this all seems to be turning, so that's a good sign. We'll have to clean everything up a little bit. I still keep getting questions about what this thing is. It's called a fiberglass pencil. You can buy them pretty cheap on Amazon and eBay, and I'd imagine even at some hardware stores. But I'll throw a link in the description if you want to go get one for yourself. Anyway, we're going to use this thing to clean up the commutator. Pretty self-explanatory. Yeah, that does not look half bad. Well, I guess the seller wasn't entirely wrong that the gears were a bit messed, but for a locomotive that costs $1, I'm just going to put them back in because there's not a whole lot we can do about that, unfortunately. I think considering it did kind of run before this, it's not going to be a super big problem. I don't know. It might be. But let's just put it back together and we'll see how it performs. Just gonna grab some test leads just to make sure that the brushes and everything else are all doing their jobs in there. Well, that checks out. Maybe I'll put a tiny bit of oil, but you have to be very careful on the side with the commutator because in a lot of cases, just due to how these things were designed, the oil will just wick right down the shaft of the motor, and then it will get sprayed out onto the commutator where it will start to burn, and that's no good. So yeah, you really have to be careful with that. Anyway, at this point, I think we can put in the other screw and start reassembling this old drive, clean up both these parts, and then we'll service the rear truck. Maybe get rid of this miscellaneous wire, and I think things might be in business. Seems to be almost impossible to do one of these repairs without breaking out a soldering iron. That all seems alright. Now I was going to get rid of these wires, but I noticed that there wasn't in fact just one, there was two. So I've got a bulb. Why don't we try to wire it in, and this thing could even have a working headlight. Maybe it's foolish to be putting a bulb in a locomotive that I don't even know works, but why not? Bulb's not really worth anything anyway. That is not good. Alright, well, theoretically this thing should be ready to roll. Look how fancy this thing is. They actually covered over the windows. That is not something you see on locomotives, usually of this era. Alright, let's bring this thing over to the track and see if it will do anything. Well, here it is, folks, the moment of truth. Will this thing start? I personally don't have super high expectations for it, but if it's better than what we started with, I'll be happy. Anyway, let's give it some power. Oh, there we go. Wow. That is way better than I expected. All right. I don't know why it was having some trouble getting going, but not hesitating much now. I just cannot believe how well this thing is running. I mean, look at the current draw. It's like non-existent. Just mint for a $1 locomotive. Now, I am really curious to see what kind of low speed this thing can do. Now, keep in mind it is missing a tooth on one of its gears, so that might inhibit it. Wow, I am absolutely amazed. I mean, compared to a high-end engine, you know, this is not fantastic. For a $1 engine with a 3-pole, that is not bad. I mean, like, you know, it's cogging because it's got a 3-pole, but yeah, totally responsive. And as you would imagine, the top speed's real good too. Well, folks, I've got to say, I am just thrilled with this thing. I did not expect it to turn out that well. You know, I thought getting it running was not impossible, but I mean, not only is it running, but as far as a locomotive like this goes, that is not bad at all. So yeah, amazing. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed, and with that, I'd like to thank you all so much for watching.